Making mistakes in a language is completely normal, and it happens at every single level. Obviously, mistakes change, but they happen at every stage in the learning process, and even afterwards. I mean, we make mistakes in our own languages as well. We have slips of the tongue, things that come out a little bit wrong, and sometimes they're a bit funny. So that happens in other languages too. It's definitely happened to me, and I'd love to hear about your mistakes in the comments if you have time to write them. But I can share some of my experiences with you and some of the experiences I've heard personally firsthand. So for me, I've been speaking Macedonian as a home language for about 15 years at this point. And so my Macedonian is fairly good. But still, there was a slip of the tongue that I had in Macedonian one time when I went out for a coffee. So here you would order a coffee, a cold coffee, that you have chocolate drizzle poured in the glass, and then you'd have the coffee inside. Now, the word for chocolate drizzle is čokoladin preliv. The problem is that if you mess up the vowels in the second word for drizzle, you end up with the word proliv, which means diarrhea. And instead of asking for čokoladin preliv, I asked for čokoladin proliv, which is basically asking for chocolate diarrhea in my glass. Of course, I recognized my mistake straight away and started laughing like a crazy person. And the poor waiter looked at me and didn't quite know what to say. But I did correct myself straight away, but still, it was slightly embarrassing, especially for my poor daughter. There are other mistakes I've made too. When I was in Germany and I was in the beginning stages of learning German, I was in a family au pairing, and there were 3 little girls that I was au pairing for. And I think it had been about a month into my stay, and I'd learnt to say, I want to go to the toilet, or I'm going to the toilet. And I'd learnt it as, ich will ins Klo. Now, a month after I'd been saying this every single day, the father of the family decided that it was time to correct me. And he started laughing and he said, "Was, willst du schwimmen oder was?" Which means, do you want to go swimming? Because if you say, "Ich will ins Klo" in German, it means you want to go inside the toilet. And as if you're going to go for a swim. So the correct way, and I learned it very quickly afterwards and have never made that mistake since, it was, "Ich will zur Toilette." And that's how you say in German, I want to go to the toilet, in a nice way. Of course, there are other things that I've seen over the years. I've watched people learning languages. So one of my good friends at university was not feeling very well one day. And she said to a Spanish speaker, "I'm not feeling very well." When he said, "¿Qué tal? How are you?" She said, "No muy bien." And she didn't really want to go into the details of why she was sick because she was feeling constipated. So it was hurting her stomach. And the Spanish speaker automatically said, "¿Estás constipada?" Which means, do you have a cold? It doesn't mean, are you constipated, as she thought he was asking, because constipada sounds like constipated, but it just doesn't mean quite the same thing. It means, have you got a cold? And she looked at him and said, "How on earth do they think of asking that kind of question?" And she sort of went really red and went, "Sí, estoy constipada," thinking she was saying she was constipated in Spanish. But she couldn't believe that she was hearing that question from him, because it was a very strange first question of, "I'm not feeling very well." I also had a friend from Spain who was in France, and she had a boyfriend, a French boyfriend. And she was trying to get all cute with the language. Now, there are words that are in common, like I said about the constipado, constipated. There are also other words that we have in common, right? So in English and in Spanish, we can play with the word to introduce. Introducir in Spanish. It's very similar. There's a word in French as well, introduire, which also sounds very similar. Now, in English and Spanish, you can play with that word and say, I'm going to introduce my mum, I'm going to introduce my dad, I'm going to introduce my fingers. This is my thumb, this is my little finger. All these kinds of cute things that you can play. And she was playing that kind of game with her boyfriend. And she said, je vais t'introduire mes doigts. I'm going to introduce my fingers, is what she thought she said. Her boyfriend looked absolutely horrified, because in French, if you say introduire, it means you're going to stick your fingers somewhere. And he said, où ça? Where are you going to stick your fingers? And of course, she didn't mean that, and we were all laughing hysterically for ages. The final thing that I'd like to share with you is when I was a young language learner, I thought it was quite cool to learn the colloquialisms, the fun things that people say in a language. And in English and in French, you can sort of say to go to the toilet in a slightly more slangy way. So I'm going to go for a piss in English, or je vais pisser in French. In Spanish, I just guessed at what that might be, and I said, voy a pisar. And my friends looked at me and they were saying, you're going to what? ¿Qué vas a hacer? What are you going to do? I said, voy a pisar. ¿Qué? Esto. And pisar in Spanish means to stomp your feet. So I was like saying, I'm going to go and stomp my feet, just randomly. And of course, they thought it was hilarious. And I learnt a new word of Spanish. And they also taught me the bad word to say to go to the toilet to, which was always a good learning experience for me at that time in my studies. So there we go. I'd love to hear your stories too. So please do write below and share your embarrassing language learning moments with us all.